coming up.
So letters have gone out, and you support CBSA. Are you aware if any money has been recovered to date?
I too want to share my congratulations to the new President of Mexico. I'm sure the Prime Minister of Canada looks forward to showing off his socks at the next Three Amigos Summit. I wanted to ask about companies operating on the GC Strategies model.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Mr. Chair, we're pleased to answer your questions about the work underway at PSPC and our main estimates. Thank you. Merci.
I know you have been here on numerous occasions as a result of the many studies that we have undertaken, and I do note that in your departmental plan, fraud and other wrongdoing remains a key risk for your department, and that, as well noted in the departmental plan, PSPC is taking steps to strengthen its approach to better know who the Government of Canada conducts business with and the potential risks that they may pose. So, Ms. Reza, you just stated in your opening remarks that there are a number of other investigations taking place, and if and when necessary, they will be referred to the RCMP when that is determined. Now, we know a few weeks ago it was announced, and maybe a number of weeks ago it was announced that 3 names had been referred to the RCMP for investigation related to approximately $5 million worth of contracts. What was the reason for the referral to the RCMP?
Thank you very much for the question. As you noted, we do have a very strong commitment to detecting, preventing, and looking for fraud. So as part of some of the recent initiatives that we've seen since about 2018, 2020, we've really been using data analytic tools. So as part of that, we were able to use that tool set to look at data analytics, mine the data, and find cases of overbilling.
So it was overbilling that was the reason for you to refer these cases to the RCMP?
That is correct.
Thank you. So what wrongdoing, so that was the wrongdoing that was detected that prompted you to refer this to the RCMP. Has the RCMP confirmed that they are investigating or are charging these individuals?
Let me start by saying that once we refer the cases to the RCMP, and there's been 4 that have been referred to since 2022, that now becomes a matter of RCMP investigation. We have no insight into it, but if you I'll just turn. Est-ce que quelque chose à rajouter?
No, you have covered it very well, so it's now in the hands of the RCMP in order for them to pursue or not.
Thank you. I know last week the minister said that we could expect future announcements. Has the department identified any other cases that may be referred to the RCMP, or are those investigations still underway, as you stated in your opening statement?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. Yes, they're still underway, and they're still in the range that was publicly announced, I think, in March of between 5 and 10.
Thank you. It has been 100 days since the Conservative Arrive Scam motion was passed to get money back from the fraudsters. What is the role of PSPC, if any, in recovering these funds?
Thank you very much for the question. We would support CBSA in terms of if they have found any ineligible actions, any inaccuracies, any fraud, we would support them as the contract authority to be able to seek restitution. Letters to that effect have gone out to the suppliers.
So letters have gone out, and you support CBSA. Are you aware if any money has been recovered to date?
Thank you very much for the question. I am not aware if any money has been recovered. I don't want to speculate at committee, but I would anticipate that there would be a result of the RCMP investigation.
Thank you. I know that the government couldn't spend money fast enough on Arrive Scam when they felt it needed to get out the door, and yet now I think we're waiting a fair length of time in order to have that money recouped. I want to turn to another other testimony that was provided at a previous committee. I believe, Ms. Reza, you were in attendance when we were discussing the Procurement Ombudsman's report on the government's contracting with McKinsey. And of particular focus was the National Master Standing Offer that was established by the government for McKinsey's benchmarking services. And I know at that time you were asked about one of the call-ups from ESDC that was worth $5.7 million that was personally approved by the Minister of PSPC at that time. And the Procurement Ombudsman found that the responses to the Treasury Board's 7 standard questions when a large procurement is conducted, and I'll quote, did not establish a link between McKinsey's exclusive rights to its benchmarking solutions and ESD's operational requirements, end quote. He also stated that ESDC's reasoning did not provide a sufficient basis for PSPC to reasonably conclude that McKinsey held exclusive rights to the extent that it was the only supplier able to supply the benchmarking services. And I know, Ms. Reza, you were the one who sent the justification to the minister. We have now seen that document. And again, there is no sufficient justification for the call-up, simply a string of statements with no corroborating evidence that the call-up was necessary. In fact, I will say there are 3 pages for submission data to justify the contract. And for this $5.7 million contract, the first page was not filled out fully. How do you reconcile this? Do you have any documentation showing how the justification was made that was not offered to the Ombudsman at the time of his report?
Thank you very much for the question. I want to start at the place that because of the financial delegation, the value of the contract being above officials, it went to the minister in that context. The procurement officer signed off that the justification provided was satisfactory. The fact that there are no resellers of McKinsey's benchmarking services, that it's a proprietary data set, and that furthermore, from a Treasury Board policy on large transformation projects, having that independent benchmark is required. The justification from a PSPC perspective and that of the client was sound. I can pause here.
I'm afraid that's our time.
Thank you, Chair. And Ms. Reza, I am going to circle back to the subject of my questions in my first round of questioning. And I guess what I'm really grappling with is how do we reconcile the fact that PSPC, you yourself as the Deputy Minister, and the Ombudsman appear to completely disagree with what can be termed as robust justification when it comes to contracting. And as I stated earlier, the Ombuds found that the answers to the 7 Treasury Board questions were insufficient. Can you tell us who was the contracting officer that you referenced in the memo to the minister that appeared satisfied with the answers to those 7 Treasury Board questions?
Thank you very much. I think it is important to note that PSPC and the deputy, myself, have accepted all the recommendations of the procurement ombudsman. So I don't want there to be a sense that there's light. So I think that's important because we welcome that kind of sunlight on our practices to make sure we have rigor. We have submitted to the committee the names of all the procurement officers. And I would just turn for a moment to see if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, if I may add also, we've learned a lot from these reports, and I would say that the challenge function that is being played right now by our contracting officer is much greater. The LPO kind of clearly made that very clear that there was this challenge function to play. So, in future sole source, we've learned from the LPO, and we're also kind of learning and tweaking the process accordingly.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. You've accepted the recommendations, and going forward, you're going to look towards implementing them. But I do sense that there's a bit of a disagreement between what the Ombudsman found in this particular case, this particular contract, and what you yourself believe to have been robust justification for why McKinsey was the only contractor that would have been able to hold the exclusive rights to this contract. Can you tell me what mechanisms are in place for PSPC to push back on, say, another department's justification if you don't believe that they've provided robust justification? What are the mechanisms in place to push back on them?
Thank you very much for the question. In fact, in the example that you just cited, the procurement officer did push back and actually drill down on those 7 questions and ask for additional information. So that's an example. There's a opportunity to advise their manager and their supervisor that they don't agree with the client. There's an opportunity with some of the new rules that have been put in place by Treasury Board to emphasize the role of the manager in the client department. As I'm sure the committee is seized with, there are roles and responsibilities both for procurement as the client, the contracting authority, and the client. And so understanding better and making sure it's clear of the escalation around it and what is actually a way to document the rigor. I think this is an area that I have learned a lot in the last year and a half around the rigor of the documentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that you are taking this to heart and have been learning much around the rigor that needs to be applied. I do have one last question. Will you provide the committee with a copy of the 7 Treasury Board questions, the answers that were provided to justify this particular contract, and the further justification that was sought by the contracting officer?
Certainly, I thought it had been, but I would be happy to confirm.
Mr. Genuis, please, for 5.
Well, thank you, Chair. I too want to share my congratulations to the new President of Mexico. I'm sure the Prime Minister of Canada looks forward to showing off his socks at the next 3 Amigos Summit. I wanted to ask about companies operating on the GC strategies model. We've talked a lot about ArriveCan specifically, but we have also been able to identify that there seem to be many companies operating on essentially the same model. That is, very small companies, 1, 2, 3 individuals operating out of a residential address, and their business is getting government contracts. That's it. That's what they do. They get government contracts and subcontract. Is it the view of the Government of Canada that we should not be contracting to companies that are using the GC strategies model, that instead we should be going more directly to the companies who do the actual work, or are you comfortable with this model continuing to be a big part of government procurement?
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's fair to say that it's been consistently asked of me for several appearances. And this IT staff augmentation, it doesn't have to be IT, but the staff augmentation model is used by every country, jurisdictions in Canada, and private sector. So it's a well-known model. In terms of the efficiency it provides to the Government of Canada, going directly to consultants may not be the most efficient way. That being said, I think the member actually asked this question to me several months ago, and I did start to look at whether or not we would have the capacity and what capacity we would need if we wanted to go right to individual suppliers. So staff augmentation is a legitimate type of business that we do, and we haven't to date looked at the size, understanding that is one of the key elements you bring the small SME. We haven't used that as a rate limiting factor for competing.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just ask though, I mean, why is this staff augmentation or GC strategies model necessary? It would seem to me that it shouldn't be that difficult to have a kind of a detailed database or inventory in government about the specific skills that exist out there. And it seems that this model is actually used to get around perceived excessive complexity of procurement. That this model is used because somebody has an existing standing offer or an existing relationship with government. So it's actually a vehicle for getting around red tape, not a necessary part of the system. Why couldn't the government have internally the people who have an expertise on finding the appropriate outside consultants maintain a detailed database of that information. Why would that not be possible?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that there are three key points here, which is government HR staffing, making sure we have the right skill sets to do what you propose. Two is the actual procurement. What is it that we're trying to bring in? What services we're trying to bring in? And third is that project management piece. When I listen to the member, I think a lot about project management. We're trying to deliver a service to Canadians. We're going to need to bring in some temporary staff augmentation, be it IT, be it project management, be it pay. And traditionally, staff augmentation firms have been the most efficient way to bring all that together.
All right. Okay, I've asked this question a few times because I'm still sort of perplexed in general by the government's approach to this. It would seem that project management capacity in particular is something that there should be a significant amount of skill within the government. I do want to try to get one or a couple more questions in, though. So it seems that when I look at the documents we received on Indigenous procurement, that there are a couple companies that are getting an enormous amount of the contracts. Ottawa-based, in some cases, very, very small firms. How much do you think is too much? Like if 5% of the set aside is for, if there's a 5% set aside for Indigenous companies, and we're finding that a very small number of companies are getting a lot of those deals, are getting 3, 5, 7% of all of the contracts. Would that suggest a problem? And what percentage do you think would be too much of that overall share?
So short answer, please.
Thank you very much. Again, I heard the question asked and I started to think about it. We don't offer a cap on any company that competes for government business. So there's no similar approach in non-Indigenous firms. So I would not understand why it would be there for Indigenous firms. There's 50,000 Indigenous firms in Canada. Whether or not they're registered on the Indigenous procurement business list is for them to decide. Like, we try to encourage them to get that number up so we have more of a competitive bassin pool.